we help people get out of debt. Now, a lot of times when people hear that, they think like consolidation loans, things like that. What we actually do is we help people who are really struggling with unsecured debt, like credit cards and all of them, by basically going and negotiating with creditors on their behalf. We have people put money in a savings account every month, get kind of on those good savings habits, and then we negotiate with the creditors. The company's about 18 years old, so we have a lot of long-standing relationships with these creditors, and we can negotiate away their debt for less than what they owe.
And then you're taking a percentage, I imagine, of the payoff?
Yeah, only when we actually settle the debt, though, so we don't do anything up front.
How big is the company?
Company is about 700 people.
That's a lot of people.
Yes, it is. It is about 200 people who are full-time, then we have a lot who are BPOs and offshore people working in our call center. We have about 80,000 people enrolled in the program at any given time.
What, Philippines BPO? Where are your call centers?
Yeah, primarily Philippines.
In the BPO space, especially in the call center space, like they've been dominant for a long, long time.
Oh yeah.
That being said, there's a lot of operators in the AI space that are trying to move in and take that stuff on. Have you guys been exploring that at all?
Yeah, you know, we're playing with the idea of AI voice agents and AI chat agents and things like that. I'll be honest, on the inbound side, people calling us, I think there's a bigger use case right now, and I think people are a little more comfortable where if they call in and it's an AI agent, especially if someone's already enrolled in the program and we already have that trust established and they know who we are, I think there's better use cases for that, and we are experimenting there. But on the outbound side, especially on the sales and marketing side, you know, we're still very human-centric, and you know, the idea of calling someone with a bot, I think it's going to be a while before that becomes, you know, commonplace and really effective for our business, especially in an environment where people are challenged with debt. It's a sensitive topic, and we want to really be there for people.
Well, I imagine you do cold calling and outbound communication, so like that's awkward enough.
Right. Now, we're only calling people who have, you know, come through one of our funnels and all of that, but still making that leap from digital to a phone call, yeah, that's hard.
It's a hard conversation to have with someone you know intimately, let alone a stranger.
Exactly.
Have you spent your career in this particular industry, or have you simply been in tech in general and this has been where you've ended up?
More tech in general. The company I was at previous to this was actually in a similar space, and I was there for about 5 years. Before I left, I think it was in December of 24, I took a little bit of a break to do the consulting and advising thing, and because I had really never taken a break in my entire professional career. And then this company reached out, they found me and said, hey, can you help do for us what you did for them? And you know, it's been a really fun ride ever since.
Well, so you joined this new company and you're joining it at a pretty interesting time. I mean, these new agentic tools are only coming out within the last year or so.
Yeah.
Claude, Codex, ChatGPT, really rolling into the, you know, being able to change the SDLC in general. As a CPTO, has that changed your approach to your product builds and your team building?
I would say that it changes every week. So, you know, when I started at this company, I knew it was going to be a really lean team, and it was really exciting to me because all of these advancements were starting to happen. But again, this was like April last year. And, you know, things like Claude Code, you know, that was very, very early if it had even come out yet, and people were still using Copilot and basically fancy autocomplete. But you saw the rate at which this stuff was developing, and I just thought, you know, I could come here and I could give this very lean team superpowers. And, you know, just as I've been here, and, you know, we've made a lot of progress in that, but it really does feel like every single month it's a new tool, it's a new strategy. So we're adapting as we go, and we've made a lot of really good progress there. You know, to your point about the SDLC, you know, I think that is just fundamentally changing, because the way we have always developed software is we've banked on this part is hard and it's going to take a long time, so it absorbs a lot of the open questions and everything that we have. And now with execution getting that much easier, you basically have to front load all the problem solving. You know, front load the conversations, front load the, you know, is this going to work? Are we solving the right business problem? And then by the time execution happens, because execution is getting easier, that's the stuff you start to offload. So everything in the SDLC just seems like it's shifting left.
The promise of AI is it gives you a lot more time back. That's never actually been proven to be true,
Right.
Because there's infinite amount of problems. We're always going to fill it up with something else. Where is the bottleneck move to for you?
There's a couple bottlenecks. And again, this comes from a little bit of uneven adoption of AI throughout the process.
From your teams or
Yeah,
in general?
from the teams, from everyone who contributes to the software development lifecycle because everyone's learning this stuff together. You've got a whole spectrum of, let's just say, engineers. Some engineers are still in the, like, I'm used to doing things my way and I'm going to use the tools, but it's not going to take over my job, to the complete opposite end of the spectrum where, people might be using it too much and just trusting whatever comes out of it. So you've got everyone, on both ends of the spectrum. Now, where you start to see the bottlenecks emerging is when you have those human touch points that still exist and may always exist, and those are kind of the seams between teams, and anytime you have a dependency. Now again, when software development was a lot slower, you could absorb these dependencies because, I have something to work on while they work on something else and we'll all come together. But these days, all of that is just kind of exacerbated because everyone can move so fast and they can get so much stuff done that if you didn't pre-work out that dependency, if you didn't pre-negotiate those conversations, then those bottlenecks still exist. Or it could be on the requirement side. Like, we didn't fully plan out this project and we've already started working on it and we're working really fast, and then we hit a wall because there was that thing we didn't think about, and now we have humans who have to go talk to each other.
Well, the number of times you enter a prompt and halfway through it, oh, shit, stop.
100%.
That, as a product person, I imagine that changes your approach for scoping a project, for articulating what the outcome is supposed to be, because if you don't know at the beginning, you're probably not going to know by the end.
Yeah, I mean, basically, whether it's an engineering problem or it's a product problem or anything, you basically have to take a step back and start to ask all those questions kind of in the abstract, solve the problem on paper. And you're relying on your teams to be genuinely curious about, but why are we solving the problem? Is there another way to do this? And more and more, as we start to build that context layer internally of how our products work and all the legacy applications, we document better. We can even start to have conversations with the AIs on, are we solving this the right way? What am I not seeing? And so we have to front load more and more of that.
This is the 12th time today I've heard curiosity.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's
and the language of
yes.
curiosity, and humans are a curious species, but it varies how curious we are. Ultra curious people, there's plenty of room for them
Yes.
in development in software engineering right now. Is there room for people that are not as naturally curious anymore?
I struggle with that because I almost think no, you almost have to be curious. It's one of the key things that I try to hire for. Are you the type of person who will not take something at face value, but try to deconstruct it, try to understand how it works? With all these new models coming out all the time, if someone is just complacent and well, I think I know. And by the way, anyone who says they know everything is probably just trying to sell you something. But if you don't have that, ingrained curiosity and want to pick things apart and stay on the cutting edge of things, I think you just get left behind.
Optimizing for anxiety is kind of exhausting.
Yes.
A curious person is often an anxious person at the same time. They're constantly game theorying things out. They're constantly thinking about the what ifs. They're constantly thinking about not just the best case, but worst case scenario for something. How do you hire for that?
I think you're right. I think a lot of very curious people are kind of in that heightened anxiety state a lot because they are, hyper optimizers and all of that. But I think there's a side of it that can kind of counterbalance it, and that is, are they also humble? The people who are intensely curious but have problems admitting when they're wrong or when there's something out there that they don't know. Having a little bit of that humility and just understanding, I'm not going to know everything. I'm not going to be right all the time. These two things can kind of counterbalance each other. I want to hire people who are kind of the mindset, I can learn from everyone around me and I'm not the smartest person in the room.
So we're going to have to run Dunning-Kruger as well as curiosity tests on people.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's changed how we hire, I imagine. I ask this question to a lot of people. Your company gives you infinite money. You can hire whoever you want. When things are changing every week, for a lot of people, I don't even know what I'm hiring for right now. Do you?
I know the general principles that I'm hiring for. I brought up curiosity, humility, empathy. As fast as all these things are moving, it kind of becomes all of our jobs to lead that change management and bring everyone along for the ride. And knowing that you can connect with someone and put yourself in their shoes, I think that's really, really important. And again, I think it helps to lower the level of anxiety because, again, you realize you're all in it together. And so I think all of these three things together really mean I'm not hiring for, you know, a certain skill set or experience as much anymore, although those are valuable. What I'm hiring for is adaptability. Have they shown that they can learn something new? Have they shown that they're questioning things? Have they shown that they've had strong relationships and have been proven wrong and came out of that? So I would think that adaptability is probably where I'm most focused on hiring people.
Empathy, adaptability, responsibility. Some of these are what we hope for best practices in humans.
To be honest,
You want to hire good dudes or good people.
100%. And that's the thing I keep coming back to. Like, yes, AI is transformational, but fundamentally, like, these are things we've always had to hire for. We've just maybe had a little more wiggle room in the past. I think what AI is doing is it's not introducing these new principles. It's really just exacerbating them, making them more important than they've ever been.
What is giving you anxiety right now, whether it is in team building or sociologically at this point?
Well, let's touch on both of those a
Cool.
little bit. There was a study that came out recently, and I don't remember who did the study, but it basically said we're getting lonelier than ever in the workplace because of AI. And you try to deconstruct why that is. Well, it means people have way more autonomy, way more agency. They can get a lot of work done. Functional boundaries are collapsing, and you have a product manager, engineer, designer, marketer all packaged together, and that means they can do work by themselves. Whereas what used to happen is you had all these different functions who had to come together to jointly solve a problem, and that's slowly going away. And again, over time, probably for the better. I mean, we used to hire front-end and back-end engineers, specifically because two different stacks, two different skill sets, and then as technology improved, you started seeing, full stack engineers, and you could do everything with JavaScript, and it's all packaged in one person. I think we're starting to see some of that now, but it means that people are doing all the jobs themselves. Now, for someone who's been in this industry a while and takes a lot of joy and pride in building teams and building cultures and great working relationships, like that part causes me anxiety because now you've got these people and they're not building those relationships all the time, and the relationships are going to atrophy if you don't, actively invest in them. So I think that's where we are right now. The pendulum has kind of shifted towards a lot of individual activity. I do imagine the pendulum is going to swing back to more group activity, but it's going to look different than it ever has before.
Do you pod people up on projects?
Yeah, we actively do, and more engineers are working together, even if they're not working on the exact same thing. They are working adjacent to each other, or they're we have a block of time every week where people are just supposed to learn AI, because we know learning is not linear. And that's where they do set aside time, and they work together, even if they're solving different problems. At least they're in a room talking to each other, which is a little hard to do when you're a fully remote company. But we're making an active effort.
I think the loneliness epidemic is less about the ability for everyone to do everything on their own and actually more about cognitive load. And the inundation of information that comes at us has killed boredom. And from boredom is where you get the desire, like, I have nothing to do, I guess I'll just go outside and play with Ricky. Because I have nothing to do. But suddenly when you can fill every waking moment of every single day with content of various types, it doesn't occur to you that you can just go out and interact with other people until you realize that you really need it. And once you realize you need it, you don't know how to get it.
Mm-hmm. I think you're absolutely right. Again, I think this is one of those things, like, this has been coming for a while, even pre-AI. Like, as soon as, social media started taking over our phones and we were all connected, I remember we were having these exact same conversations. And over time, and it takes a long time to get there, and it's taken probably about 20 years for people to realize, oh, wait, I need to disconnect. I need to have, start having a little bit more balance in my life. And I think we're going to start seeing that with AI more, and maybe we don't wait 20 years for it, ideally, but people do need to realize it's the same thing. Like, you have to disconnect. You have to, go outside and touch grass. I would get on the motorcycle and drive for ridiculous amounts of time just to be disconnected.
The other part of having interactive teams is the conversation happens around remote work versus in office. You're already operating at a mixture of distributed or at least overseas teams, or do you optimize for in-office work?
So we have no office as of the pandemic. Back in 2020, they basically said, okay, we're fully remote. Why pay for real estate? So majority of the center of gravity of our company is still around Baltimore, but we've started to hire all over the country. And we are trying to make a deliberate effort to bring people together periodically. Used to be, previous company I worked at, it was right before the pandemic. And when I would go into our San Mateo office, I had one team. And then down, we also had a Phoenix office. And I had another team there. And it really was, I had two teams. Because people would always bias to talking to people just around them. And then 6 weeks later, pandemic hit. And one of the really interesting things was I had one team because everyone could now talk to each other with the exact same level of effort and without the bias of proximity. And I really liked that. And over time, as we started going back into offices, just 1 day a week, what I realized was I was going into our San Mateo office, my close office, and I was basically holding myself up and having meetings. But when I went and I traveled to Phoenix, I was meeting people and I was, trying to build relationships. And then I had to take a step back and wonder, like, why do I treat these two offices the same? To me, an office is a tool. It's where you intentionally set aside time to go build relationships and all of that. And you can leverage a home office just like a tool as well. This is my heads down productive time. So again, I do think there's a lot of value in bringing people back together for specific things, but I would hate to do it just reflexively, like, oh, we just have to get people together, because I think there's a little bit of intentionality to it.
Is your engineering team fully distributed?
Fully distributed. We've got a few in Latin America. That's kind of our nearshore contracting arm of the team, but everyone else is distributed throughout the United States.
How have you found the difference between those team members and domestic?
We really tried to treat them as, first-party members of the team, and honestly, I don't see a whole lot of working relationship difference. The nice thing is, because we are largely East Coast centric, they're 1 hour ahead. It's not like working with Eastern Europe teams or India teams, which, fantastic talent, but the time zone differences, it can be a little oppressive.
No, I think there's some really interesting cultural nuances when you're all awake at the same time and you all see the news at the same time.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about the SDLC and how that's all changing, but even on the hiring side, I think a lot of the same sort of practices can start to apply. So I mentioned, we can do more shifting left. We can do more spec-driven development and do all the problem solving up front on, what are we going to build? Why are we going to build it? Why do we need it? All of that, and then you execute. And one of the interesting things that we've seen is on the hiring front, and keep in mind, we're a 700-person company. We have call center employees, we have sales agents, and so we have a lot of bulk hiring that we have to do. And part of this is also, well, why don't we take a step back and actually define up front, what does a good employee look like? And what kind of behaviors do we want them to exhibit? And how would we know based on reading a resume? And you can actually start to train a lot of, and prompt really, these AIs on being able to ferret out some of that information when you're reading resumes, and you're able to shortlist a lot of candidates. And this has actually caused us to challenge a lot of our maybe hiring biases from the past on, hey, we're looking at these companies. Well, if we can dig into the details a little, we can shortlist, and then we can really streamline our interview process because we did that problem solving up front.
Yeah, it would also help you avoid class action lawsuits like Workday is dealing with right now,
Totally.
which is always important.
Yes.
The interesting thing about AI is it's going to force people to optimize for trust, in person, and high touch, more than in any other time, I think, in history. So if you can, how can the AI tools be used to actually facilitate that outcome?
I think that's absolutely true. But the other thing that I think that it's really going to force people to do is define what they want. Like this idea of actually writing down, what is the definition of good? I think that AI is forcing us to have our kind of DevOps moment. So DevOps, as you probably know, really forced us to blur this line between what an operations team did. Like you have application engineers building something over here, but I need to deploy it, I need to run it. Hey, ops team, do that for me. And then again, you had dependencies. DevOps basically came along and said, actually, we'll give you the tools. You be accountable for what you're trying to do, and those teams can basically run and be more autonomous and all of that. And I think we're having that DevOps moment now, only at a broader scale across a lot of different functions, like brand and creative. Well, I don't want to always have a design sort of dependency for everything I'm building. Hey, design, can you give me the rules you follow? Can you write down what the definition of good is so I can do it myself? Or I think we're past this age of needing a team of people who write reports. Hey, I'm going to build something and go write me a report so I know if it works. I think that's going to be handed over and more autonomous too.
I hope so. I think, however, that rather than defining what good is, what AI is right now, its capabilities, is able to produce something that's good enough.
Totally.
And that's where some of the tension lies. Like, this is good enough for someone who isn't a designer, but the designer looks at it and says, that's not good.
Yeah.
It's good enough.
Yeah.
And there is an inherent danger of optimizing for good enough sociologically.
I think that's absolutely true. And you're never going to get those touch points down to nothing. But the important part is to encode the thinking and start to democratize and, come in when it's the human high leverage work that you need to have, not all the low leverage work for, to your point, just getting to good enough. And by the way, from a product standpoint, sometimes good enough is good enough because the goal is to learn, to put something quick out there just so that we can get feedback and decide the direction.